Shalom Lukulam. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest in our series of discussions in English on Zoom here at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. My name is Paul Gross. I'm a senior fellow here, and every couple of weeks we have a guest either in person or on Zoom to discuss a relevant topic for those of you following the news here in Israel, or those of you interested in Israeli or Jewish history. Today we're getting back into the matzav, so to speak, the current situation, and those of you who've been following what we've been doing for the past few months will know that we've had a number of conversations with security experts and others about various aspects of the war. What we haven't done, although of course this topic has come up in several conversations, is focus on Iran, on the, if you like, the head of the octopus or whatever creature you want to call the constellation of anti-Israel forces in the Middle East, which are in various ways supported and funded by Iran. But we have with us one of the Israeli experts on the country and the regime. So we're going to be discussing that with him. It's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Meir Javedanfar. He's an Iranian-Israeli lecturer, author, and commentator. He's been teaching Iranian politics at Reichman University in Herzliya since 2012. He's the co-author of a biography of former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He's published many articles on Iran and Iran-related matters for many publications, including Foreign Affairs, Our Monitor, The Guardian, and others. And he's lectured in over 20 universities and briefed officials and academics in more than 30 countries. He has a PhD from Haifa University. Dr. Meir Javedanfar, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Paul. Hello, shalom, everybody.
So let's, we're going to get to, of course, the attack of April 13th. But I want to start with October 7th and to get your reading on the following question. You see a lot of different takes on this question, which is, how involved was Iran in the planning of it? Were they, some people say they had full knowledge of it. Some say they didn't. They knew something was going to happen, and of course they were supporting it. They didn't know it was going to happen then, and actually they were surprised by Sinwar's decision to launch the attack then. What's your? I know you follow obviously what goes on in Iran very closely. What's your reading of that?
Well, let me tell you about my own journey regarding this question. I was very evangelical about it, that it's impossible that Hamas would have done this without Iranian knowledge, because Hamas risks so much for Iran by undertaking such an operation. But then I started asking questions, and we always should when we feel too sure of ourselves. Started asking questions, okay, but hang on a minute. But Hamas did risks a lot for Iran. Would the Iranians have allowed Hamas to undertake such an operation alone and to possibly drag Iran? And they did drag Iran in, and to endanger Hezbollah. I mean, if Iran would have been involved, in my estimate, they would have either said no, or they would have said, okay, we'll do a simultaneous operation from the north with Hezbollah and from the south in Hamas, because Iran did. I saw it the way I saw it. Iran was caught by surprise, and they haphazardly the next day involved Hezbollah in the war. So I think they were not involved in the timing. They surely knew there's going to be an operation. I mean, for God's sake, the Iranians trained al-Nukhba, which, from my understanding, they are the best fighters that Hamas has, and they did catch us by surprise. The quality of their fighting and their coordination. So they were trained in Syria. They were trained in Iran, and they came back via Egypt, either via tunnel or via the legal path. I don't know, through the Egyptian border. So next time someone tells you that Gaza is a giant border, make sure to remind them that there were hundreds of Hamas people who left Gaza, went and trained in Iran, in Syria, and then they came back to Gaza. So I think at minimum, in my opinion, we could say that Iran was involved in the training and the preparation for such an attack.
Hmm.
But quite possibly the Iranians didn't tell him about it. I mean, my opinion, I don't think they told them about the timing. Probably because if I were Hamas, I would be worried about saying anything to Iran because there have been so many reports in the press regarding Israeli intelligence presence inside Iran that um, so that could have been a consideration. Even the Hamas people themselves, until they went to the front lines, did not know what they were doing until they got their final push, the final uh, call to go over the hill, as they used to say in the First World War. Um, this is my opinion, and again, everything comes with a question mark. We have to, we have to be very careful about what we say when we talk about it. Not to put exclamation marks at the end, but put question marks. I'm not an intelligence official, but I'm in academia. But I always learn from people who are in intelligence, and because their assessment of things can risk lives of their own family sometimes. And they always say when you have an assessment, put a question mark at the end because you can never be sure about anything. And we found that out to our detriment on the 7th of October.
Yeah, yeah. I want to just remind our audience that you can write questions into the chat at the bottom of your screen, and we'll put those questions to our guest a little later. So in your estimation, there's a decent chance they were not they were taken by surprise somewhat by what happened, but obviously by the timing of it, right? But once it happened, of course, they were four square behind it. They were there lauding the attack as a great achievement.
Oh,
And then there's a decision that the Iranian regime has to make about Hezbollah's involvement. And as you said, there's been this, there's been what prior to October 7th would be a major escalation in the north, but stopping well short of that full scale second front war, which would basically mean that Israel and Hezbollah are in an all-out war. And is that something that you think Iran is deliberately holding Hezbollah back from that, or do you think that Hezbollah, because of their own concerns with their relations with the domestic issues within Lebanon, are not going ahead with it?
I think it's a mixture of both. The Iranians see the Hezbollah missile arsenal as a kind of a giant Iranian aircraft or missile carrier parked on Israel's border in order to deter Israel from attacking Iran's nuclear installations. So, if Hezbollah wastes all its missiles right now in a war with Israel, then Iran's nuclear program will be left badly exposed. And as we saw in the reported Israeli attack on the night of the 19th of April, Israel was able to penetrate Iran's air defenses around nuclear installations. So, for Iran, I don't think wants to risk losing or using up all of its all the missiles of Hezbollah. And replacing those missiles will be difficult because Iran is right now producing missiles for export related purposes for Russia. So replacing Hezbollah's missiles, which would be for free or at a cost to Iran, would be even more costly to Iran. Whereas right now they can sell it to the Russians in return for all hosts of things that they're getting from Russia. I also think Hassan Nasrallah, I think, yes, of course, it seems that he's concerned about his people. The Lebanese economy is a basket case. I mean, it's unbelievable. The Lebanese people, I'm a Persian, and people say in Israel, oh, you're the best business people. No, we're not. The Lebanese are the best business people in the Middle East. You give them anything, they turn it into gold. I mean, I can give you a whole host of companies that Lebanese business people abroad, outside of Lebanon. Has Carlos Slim was one of the world's richest men, and he's Lebanese Mexican. But their country is a basket case. It's miserable, and I think, thankfully, that Nasrallah recognizes this. But all of these things could explode.
Yeah.
All of these things we could just have one major missile that goes errant missile that goes into a hospital or goes to a populated school, and we could have the whole situation blow up in our faces. Which is why, as an Israeli, it's very important to me. One of the key pillars of our security, apart from, of course, the IDF and the Israeli public, is our relations with the United States of America and the European countries. Don't let anybody sell you this populist idea that we can do everything on our own right now. Yes, we could do it, but the cost would be huge. We have to be smart and strong, both at the same time. And we saw the results of our cooperation with the United States and our European allies and Jordan. Jordan was a key ally, a key country in terms of stopping the Iranian missile attack, which I'm sure, and drone attack, which I'm sure we'll talk about more.
Yeah, I wanted to get to that, and the obviously that was in retaliation for Israel's attack on this whatever they're calling it, the part of an Iranian consulate
it's
or
a
something
complex.
in
It's the building in the complex of the Iranian embassy.
Right.
It was not the Iranian consulate, and it was not the Iranian embassy.
Right. So this was the Israeli attack, which amongst others killed a senior Quds Force commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And after that, there's this big question of what's the Iranian response going to be. So my first question to you is, were you taken by surprise by? I mean, I think obviously it was an unprecedented attack. That Iran has never directly attacked Israel before, and the actual, I think this is right. Maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong. That the actual, even though, as it turned out, it was pretty enough. It didn't really have much impact on Israel because of what you just said. The Israel and its allies preventing the missiles getting through, but the actual sort of tonnage of missiles and drones that were fired, I think is the largest that's ever been fired by one country at another in a single attack.
Yes, 60 tons of explosives were flying towards us that night. 60,000 kilograms of explosives were flying towards us that night, and I don't know if I was being too Zionist or too wishy-washy or too Israeli or too Tel Avivian. I was sitting here and I said, we'll take care of it somehow, somewhere. And that's not good, to be honest with you. It's, maybe it's a reaction of living in England for 17 years. In England, before everything, with all due respect to my British compatriots, I lived in England for 17 years as a refugee from Iran. I'm very grateful for the opportunity of being there. But one thing that used to really get on my nerves about living in England is before you started anything, everybody said, nah, it's not going to go well. Nah, come on. It really used to get on my nerves, being so pessimistic. And I came to Israel, and one of the things I love about this country is everybody's so optimistic. Everybody's so optimistic. It's just incredible. Maybe that explains why we are the startup nation, but
yes,
we'll be okay. We'll take care. We'll do it. We'll get through this. And then you wake up in the morning and think, holy Moses, 330 missiles. Apparently, I think another 200 were lost on the way. No, sorry. 200 missiles were lost on the way. I don't know if it was including the 330 or apart from, but 200 missiles crashed in Iran and they didn't make it. But ladies and gentlemen of the audience, next time somebody tells you the Iranians tell the Americans that they're about to attack, please tell them that's a load of nonsense. The Iranians afterwards, because they failed, they said, no, we just wanted to send a message. We told the Americans we were about to attack. That's absolutely nonsense. Or as they say in Gaelic, malarkey, which is one of the favorite words for President Biden. Absolutely malarkey. They didn't tell us what they're going to attack. They didn't give any notice. Nonsense. They failed, and then afterwards, because they failed, they said, "Oh, we didn't mean it. It was." I'm sorry for being facetious here and being a bit sarcastic. It's pathetic, to be honest with you. They fired 330 missiles and drones at us, hoping, okay, 100, 200 will get stopped by the Israelis. Another 130 will get through, and that will cause and would have caused significant damage to the state of Israel. So we are very lucky because of our own air force and air defense systems. Actually, it's really the performance of our anti-missile system has led apparently to a lot of interest from other countries from Israeli companies, which was a real showcase of our. I mean, who needs the Farnborough Air Show anymore? When you've got these kind of attacks and you can showcase your defense systems. And we're very grateful for the technology, for the investment, and also for our friends in France, Britain, and the United States, and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, which is a key country. I cannot begin to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, how many former generals of the IDF we have in Reichman University and other places who say how, and they're the ones who know far better than me. I mean, they're the ones who have dealt with issues of life and death, and they say how crucial the stability of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan is to the state of Israel, and this is a relationship we must nurture.
You mentioned that, of course, the Iranian regime, after the fact, downplayed. The claim was that they didn't really mean to cause much harm. They also downplayed Israel's response. Right, there was also very much Israel's response, which to my estimation was actually because we were all wondering what Israel was going to do, of course, and some people were saying Israel shouldn't do anything, other people were saying that it should go all out, and I think it was actually to my mind a very smart response in that it wasn't something that was going to set off a regional war, but it did, I think, prove that Israel can, if it wishes, get through Iranian air defenses relatively easily. Was that also your reading of it?
First of all, Iran is a complicated country. The regime is very complicated in terms of understanding which factions and what's the best way to approach it. Some people in Iran you could reach a deal with, even though you don't like them. People like Rouhani and Zarif, and I supported the Iran nuclear deal, and I still support it, and I think it was a terrific mistake to leave the Iranian nuclear deal. At the same time, I've always been frustrated. There are other people in the Iranian regime, in the same Iranian regime, that only understand force. And Paul, for some reason, we've been attacked by the Iranian regime from 1991 by proxy, and we did not attack directly until, according to foreign reports, late 2009, 2010. We should have attacked Iran in response for all these proxy attacks against our people, and against our brethren in Argentina and all the embassy bombings and everything long before that. So for Israel, it would have been a colossal mistake not to respond, because why did the Iranian regime attack us? According to Iranian claims, since October 7, Israel has eliminated 17 members of the IRGC in Syria. So they're saying, hang on a minute, this is unstoppable. Iran, why does Iran invest in Hezbollah, Paul? Why does Iran invest in Hamas? So that they attack Israel, and so the Iranians can say we were not involved. So that we attack Hamas and we attack Hezbollah, so Iran never gets attacked directly. But somehow the Iranians are saying, hang on, this proxy model doesn't work anymore. The Israelis are attacking our territory. The Israelis are killing our people in Syria at an unprecedented number. So we have to change this equation. And I think it's also valid to assume that Hezbollah people and others were saying to the Iranians, look, we're doing all the heavy lifting here. We are the ones doing all the fighting. You're sitting in Tehran. You're the ones who are saying, yes, we should fight Israel. Why are you not doing anything? So I think more than anything, through that attack on the night of the 13th of April, Ayatollah Khamenei was drawing a red line. He was saying with that attack that from now on, any attack by the state of Israel against Iranian regime officials or Iranian installations inside or outside of Iran will henceforth be met with a direct attack from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that is our red line. And it would be a colossal mistake for any government in the state of Israel, be they from the left or the right, to allow such a regime to draw a red line for us. So we had to attack. We must attack. And the attack was very sophisticated. And again, much like everything else, we have to be smart and strong. And it was a very smart attack. From my understanding of, we didn't cross Jordanian borders, so it meant probably flew Israel, Syria, Iraq, and without entering Iranian airspace, from what we know from the press, they fired missiles that, yes, destroyed the anti-missile system, the Russian anti-missile system. And why were we able to destroy that anti-missile system, Paul? Again, I'll refer you to that pillar of security that is cooperation with other countries for the state of Israel. The Greeks and the Cypriots have S-300s, and they allow the Israeli Air Force for many years to carry out maneuvers against these systems. So we know the S-300 system, thanks to our cooperation, and this is why cooperation with other countries is a force multiplier, and we must continue with it.
Okay. I want to, before I get to questions from our audience, I can see there are already quite a few coming in. I want to just ask for your assessment of some internal Iranian issues. The supreme leader Khamenei is not a young man and not a well man. He's
from Mashhad. They live a long time. He's from the city of Mashhad.
But
don't ever mess with Mashhadis, especially people who live in New York that you know, in Great Neck. They live a very, very, these people are strong people, very, very, and also in Iran, clerics live a very long life. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, they're probably quite well looked after, I suspect. But what
exactly?
I mean, so is there a succession plan? I read somewhere that he's actually grooming his own son in some way to be a successor, or I don't know. Is there a, because obviously so much of the power, as you said, the Iranian political system is extremely complicated, and we don't need to get into it too much here unless people have questions. But the supreme leader is the supreme leader, and the identity of the occupant of that role is very important. So do we have some sense of who his successor might be?
What I can tell you is that the question of who is going to be his successor and the whole issue of choosing a successor is a classified matter in Iran. They're not discussing it in the press. And that in itself tells us a lot. It goes to show that the regime is worried about the whole succession program, how the next supreme leader could upset one faction or another. Otherwise, why would they hide it? Why not just bring the person in so we know who they are? Some people are suggesting it could be his son. Some people are suggesting it could be Raisi, or it could be someone else. I would like to remind your viewers, as somebody who did half of his PhD on Iran-Soviet relations, and as a result became very interested in Soviet history, a lot of people did not think that Stalin was going to replace Lenin before Lenin died. Stalin was a boring bureaucrat, very dull and gray, and with a terrible speaking ability, and a lot of people discounted him. And here we are, or we saw it. Khamenei, before he became supreme leader, for 8 years he was a president, and not a very good one, and not a very powerful one. And Ayatollah Khomeini was grooming Ayatollah Montazeri, but he fell out with him due to massive executions. In 1988, Ayatollah Mutahari, whatever you want to say about Iranian Ayatollahs, had a conscience, and he objected heavily to the mass executions. So Khomeini removed him, and we ended up with Khamenei. So with Khamenei's successor, it could be also somebody we are not expecting. That's something that history has taught us. But what we are hearing is that, in Iran, we have the most powerful institutions are the regime institutions, whose heads are appointed by the supreme leader. And then below them in the hierarchy are government institutions. The heads of the government institutions and ministries are elected by the people in elections that are heavily controlled by the regime institutions. But in Iran, there is elections. I mean, in the 1997 elections for Khatami, 70% of Iranians voted. I mean, that's something you would dream about in the UK and America. 70% of the public voting, and there were these large numbers. Massive participation. But now even the regime is admitting that the participation is just pathetically low. I mean, they recently had the runoff to the parliamentary elections, and one of the candidates, I think, got 4%. It's pathetic. I think the regime is realizing that the people just don't believe in these elections anymore. So we are hearing murmurs. Recently, Mr. Rouhani, who wanted to join the council to elect the next supreme leader, was disqualified, despite the fact that he was a president. So it's and he's saying that the reason why they don't want him to be elected, is that to be part of the council is because they are thinking of doing away with the whole government in Iran. So there will no longer be a president. The Republican aspect of the Islamic Republic of Iran could be done away with. And so this is something that that's really worrying the regime, and this is something that's worrying people of what's going to be afterwards.
Right, that it could be a change of system, right? That it could actually
correct, not just a new supreme leader, but change of system.
So it could switch to kind of almost a kind of full-on theocracy.
Right? Correct.
Yeah.
Like Soviet Union, basically. Sorry, like Russia or the Soviet Union. Correct.
Right. Because you have these parallel systems, right? You have the elected representatives, and then you have the supreme leader and the mullahs.
Regime institutions institutions, they are above, they're in the hierarchy, and government institutions are below, and they are subservient to the regime.
And the regime institutions include the Revolutionary Guard.
Correct.
Which is far more powerful than the regular army, than the regular Iranian armed forces, right?
Absolutely, because in Iran, the regime has learned that in order to protect itself, it needs to have an army within the army, it needs to have a government within a government, and it needs to have an economy within the economy. So that if the government economy and the people's representatives turn against the regime, it could defend itself. So it has the IRGC to protect the regime. The goal, it's the title even says Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. There's no Iran in that title. No Iran. It's to guard the revolution, not Iran.
Right. Islamic.
So to protect the regime militarily, have the revolutionary guards. To protect the regime politically, have all these regime institutions who control elections, control what happens in the parliament, etc., etc. And to control the regime economically, there's all these conglomerates in Iran who only answer to Khamenei, and they wield tremendous monopolistic power.
All right, thank you very much. I'm gonna start firing some questions at you that have been put to us by the audience, and we'll see how we go with these. So there's a couple here that I want to combine because they're on a similar theme. There's one from Joseph there's one from Joseph and one from Barbara. Joseph, who asks why you think, and this is obviously his perspective, why you think the Biden administration doesn't seem to be concerned about Iranian nuclear ambitions, and Barbara, who asked why the US is courting Iran, removing sanctions and handing over money.
Well, Barbara, they're not doing that. The Chinese continue to buy oil from Iran. And the United States is not cracking down against the Chinese for reasons that are related to America's dealings with the Chinese. If they do that, then that's going to be a serious problem for the Iranian regime. Why is President Biden not doing that? I think it's to do with considerations regarding relations with China. Um, um, but at the same time, President Biden does not want the Iranian regime to have nuclear weapons. They are not handing them money. They are very serious partners of ours in efforts to stop the Iranian regime's nuclear program. And they are doing the best. Look, one thing I found out from not just from October 7th, but since Russia invaded Ukraine, is that the United States does not have infinite sources. There's limitations of how much sources the Americans have. You know, they're involved in Ukraine, they're involved in South China Sea against China, which is becoming far stronger than before, and they're also helping us. They're involved in the Middle East, they're involved in against the Houthis. They're doing their best. They're not trying to. They're trying to find a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear problem. It's so far it's been Khamenei who's not been interested. But interestingly, prior to the 7th of October attack, there was talk of a limited deal between Iran and the United States to contain Iran's nuclear program, which has now reached 60% enrichment. That's just incredibly high. But it was the October 7th attacks ruined it. So the Americans, I think President Biden is doing his best. With all due respect to President Trump, I don't know what he's going to do different, to be honest with you. I don't want to get into domestic politics. U.S. domestic politics, that's not my business. But President Biden is doing his best to contain Iran. And one of the reasons why he wants us to wrap up the fighting in Gaza, and that's another angle to all this confrontation with Iran, is so that we can focus on Iran. So we reach a new government in Gaza headed by the PLO. That means taking Gaza out of Iran's hands, which would be a tremendous setback for the Iranian regime. And then by ending the war, we would all be able to focus back on Iran's nuclear program and presence in other countries, which would be another setback for the Iranian regime. But of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu has a different opinion due to his own calculations and considerations. But President Biden is doing his best, I think, and he's a tremendous ally of the state of Israel. He has taken some decisions recently that have angered some people in the United States, and I can understand. But look, he was here during the first week at our weakest moment. Paul, I don't know if you also heard in the news that apparently Prime Minister Netanyahu was not functioning for the first 5 days, according to newspaper reports in Israel. And President Biden immediately sent an aircraft carrier and sent 200 U.S. flights. So he's doing his best. I think he's a tremendous ally of the state of Israel, and as an Israeli, we are indebted to him.
Okay, thank you. There was a country we haven't discussed is Saudi Arabia. There was a question. There was a question about the state of the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and if I can just sort of piggyback on that, what's the one of the ways in which the October 7th attack was beneficial, if you like, for Iran, was that it delayed or stopped or stymied the burgeoning relationship between Israel. What's the state of the relationship, and how do you see this whole question of an Israeli-Saudi normalization in the context of the Iranian?
Oh, that broke my heart. I'm telling you, Paul, that broke my heart. How that attack thwarted our approach one with the Saudis. We had 3 different Israeli ministers in Saudi Arabia, I think 4 or 5 months prior to that attack. We were so close. To be honest with you, I don't have an informed answer to give you. I mean, all I know is from the press. The Saudis want us to recognize the state of Palestine. Hang on. The Saudis, alongside the Emiratis, want us to become involved in a peace process with the PLO, not Hamas. And in return, they would establish relations with us, and as a condition, sorry, as a condition for, I have to speak like a lawyer in this business because, you know, it's words are very powerful. And we have to come to a conclusion. Look, Israeli security experts have to decide whether we can replace Hamas with the PLO. It seems that the IDF and the Defense Minister Gallant do want to do that, and they believe it's a viable solution, which is why they're having a massive differences, public differences with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And if that happens, and there is a path to replacing the PLO, to replacing Hamas with the PLO, then I think that would make it easier for us to go back to the original road of improving relations with the Saudis. Alongside other things, I also, for the last 19 years, I'm a commentator on Israel-Palestine affairs for Persian language media, for Iran International in London and BBC Persian. And I can tell you one of the things I understand from other experts is that if we send the PLO to Gaza, there's a risk that the Hamas will, you know, confront them, and there could be another civil war, which is why it's very important that the PLO are either accompanied by other armies such as Emiratis or Moroccans or Egyptians. Otherwise, we're going to see, as if I can borrow Enoch Powell's famous rivers of blood, we could really see rivers of blood in Gaza, because Hamas over the years has developed a massive conglomerate of smuggling businesses, hotels and other business interests, and they would be loath to see the PLO take over it. So we have to take that into consideration also when we talk about the PLO taking over Hamas in Gaza. I think that would be to the interest of the state of Israel. Of course, you know, it has to be approved by the security echelon in Israel. The IDF experts, the Amman, the military intelligence, and others have to give their verdict. But I don't want to see 18-year-old Israelis giving vaccinations in the middle of Gaza or distributing milk, powdered milk, in the middle of Gaza, because our young people could become sitting ducks in Gaza. And that's the last thing I want.
And just to clarify, the Iranian this would be rapprochement with the Saudis would be bad news for Iran.
Terrible.
Because
the Iranian regime wants to see Israel isolated in the Middle East. And the Iranian regime wants to see America weakened in the Middle East. But before the 7th of October, President Biden came with this corridor, economic corridor, that connected India, Emirates, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. And this was very much against Iran's interest to push America out. And that interest aligns with the interest of Russia and China also. And also they want to see Israel. Look, one of the questions, please allow me to be a good Jew by asking a question to a question that was recently asked. Okay, by answering a question with a question. Why does the Iranian regime plan to destroy Israel? That's a question that I've been asked many times, and it's a question I ask myself. And in my opinion, the way the Iranian regime wants to eliminate Israel is not by nuclear weapon. Of course, we must not allow them to have nuclear weapon at any point. Some people say it would use it against Israel. Other people say no, it would use it as a deterrence. I don't care. In neither scenario, they must not have a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Okay? But the way the Iranian regime overall wants to eliminate Israel is by making life impossible for Israelis, by striking the fear of God into Israelis so that they pack up and they leave. And this is something that Nasrallah let it be slipped soon after the October 7th attack. He says, oh, look at these Israelis, they're leaving. Go and get a second passport. Go and get a second passport and, go to the country of your forefathers. Don't stay here. And Khamenei, apparently, I've been told, also talks about it in his book on Palestine. That's what they want to do. And by Israel reaching a deal with the United States, with Saudi Arabia. That would be the opposite. That would mean stability for the state of Israel. That would mean economic development for us. And that's a nightmare for the Iranian regime, and it's a nightmare that I would love to accomplish.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question here which is more about the Iranian ideological position. Shmuel Yerushalmi asks about whether he talks about how Iran obviously is a Shiite power. It finances and supports, amongst others, Sunni terrorist groups like Hamas. Does it have an ambition to lead sort of a world Islamic? Does it have ambition to be sort of a leading Islamic power?
Yes, yes, absolutely,
right.
absolutely, absolutely. You know, one of the Shmuel, one of the discussions from early on, from the inception of the Islamic Republic in 1979, which continues till today, is should Islam be for Iran or should Iran be for Islam? Should Islam serve Iranian interests, thus making the borders of Islam the borders of Iran? Or should Iran serve the interest of Islam, thus making the borders of Iran the borders of Islamic countries? This has been an ongoing question. And Iran for Islam, those who advocate Iran for Islam, are the winners, because this is what Ayatollah Khomeini advocated, and this is what Ayatollah Khamenei has advocated even more and has been far more successful about it. This is the worst regime in Iran since I don't know when. I mean, the damages they have caused is human lives and economic damages, both to the people of Iran and the region, has been tremendous. But one thing cannot be denied. Iran has never been stronger in this region. Iran has never had such influence in this region for the last perhaps 300 or 400 years. The regime has been tremendously successful in terms of finding a presence in this region. It's willing to work with Shia and with Sunnis in order to extend its influence. It's the Sunnis who don't accept them. Iran would be very happy to work with Sunnis, and it works with Sunnis such as Hamas. If I can just give you a personal anecdote. I was considering learning Arabic, and for other reasons I stopped. But anyway, while I was doing it, I found a teacher in Egypt, an educated young lady in Egypt, in the city of Alexandria. And she asked me, among other things, why do you want to learn Arabic? I said, I want to explain Israel to the world. And she says, to the Arabic speakers, because but there are many people who do it. But I said, okay, I want to also explain Iran to the world. There's nobody who does it, to the Arabic world. She says, we don't want to know about Iran. They're not Muslims. So, excuse me? I said, yeah, they are Shia. The Shia believe in Ali, which is the nephew of Prophet Muhammad. They don't believe in Prophet Muhammad. And I'm telling you, as a Jew who lived in a Shia country, I was offended. And I was suddenly defending the Shia. I said, excuse, don't say, yeah, that's wrong. The Shia do believe in Prophet Muhammad, but they also believe in Ali. And she said, "Oh, they're not real Muslims." That oh my God! And this was from an educated. She says to me, "We hate the Shia more than we hate Israel," and which says a lot, really. This is the history of Islam is a fascinating one. There's a book, I think if I can. Destiny Disrupted, I think it's called. I'll share you the link for all of our viewers who are interested in the history of Islam, and I think those who care for Israel and the Middle East. It's very important to study the history of Islam, and this book really explains it in a fantastic fashion, and I will share it with you. It's really interesting how Islam became politicized after the death of Prophet Muhammad, and we still live today from the consequences of that through the Shia Sunni conflict. I will just send you the link now. In fact, I want to share screen.
You can write it into the chat. You can write the link into the chat, Meir.
Okay, I will
and then everyone will get it.
Right in the chat. I recommend. Okay. I'll put it in a minute. The system is slowing down for some. Oh, here we go. I'll put it in the chat. There we go.
Great. Thank you very much. So there's a question here. Yeah. So Yaniv asks about the potential for another 2009 style green movement uprising.
I wish.
In Iran.
I wish.
And maybe if you could expand on that, many of us will remember that more recently than that, there were a lot of protests about there was the hijab, the protests against the the disgusting killing of a woman for not wearing a hijab. There were the economic protests. What's the state of, should we say, sort of social unrest in Iran and the response of the regime?
The regime is very concerned about a possible uprising. This is one of the reasons why it didn't respond to Israel's reported attack. Inflation is at 70%. You talk to Iranians, I just don't know how they live. Iranian Jews are okay. I mean, financially speaking, most Iranian Jews are fine. There's only 7,000 left anyway. But most of them have, my understanding is that they have homes, they rent out their homes, so it's a kind of guaranteed income. Why they don't leave is another question. Just to give you a little side note, Iranian Jews who've left Iran after 2000 and moved to the US have found it much more economically difficult and challenging than those who were there before 2000. And some Iranian Jews in Iran, especially the older generation, watch this and they say, "Dude, I don't want to sell my big house and live in a tiny apartment in Westwood or in Holon and see a senior degradation of my economic status." So they stay in Iran, and generally, I mean, except in some cases, they leave Jews okay. They leave Jews alone, generally, as long as they don't get involved with the regime and as long as they don't do anything against the regime and against economically or politically, they generally leave them alone. But the people I don't know how they live. I mean, the amount of depressed people in Iran, Paul, the amount of antidepressants people take, those who can afford it, and those who can't afford it, they buy opium. We have in Iran, we have our glorious neighbors, Afghanistan. They are to opium what Mexico is to tequila. And it flows freely from Afghanistan at a very cheap price, and the regime allows it to come in because it's kind of like subsidized Prozac. It's it calms people, and but yeah, the regime is doing terribly. I mean, we all want to see the regime fall, but I'm not counting on it. Because let's say, okay, the regime has somewhere between, let's say they have 1 million people on their payroll, 1.5 million, that would stand up. Okay, 2 million. There are 80 million Iranians, 78 million Iranians. You need 5 or 6 million of them to pour onto the streets. Would 2 million be enough? Probably, because they're willing to kill. Let's just say the numbers fall short. They can bring 100,000 Shia Iraqis and Lebanese who have no problem killing Iranians. They would have no problem opening fire and massacring Iranians. They don't like us anyway. We are Persian. And last but not least, I don't think Putin will let that happen. Look at the way he saved Lukashenko in Belarus. Look in 2020. Look at the way he saved Assad in 2015. I'm pessimistic, and I hope I'm going to be proven wrong.
Okay. There are a couple of questions about Iran's sort of covert operations abroad. There was one question was from Jonathan about reports he saw that Iran is trying to undermine the regime in Jordan. And let me just give and Olga asks whether you think the Iranians are involved in the anti-Israel protests in campuses in the United States. I read today that China might be involved, but do you think Iran is also involved?
First of all, regarding Jordan, they're trying to smuggle weapons from Jordan to West Bank. And may the Lord of Moses have mercy on us if they succeed, because the West Bank is not Gaza. It's within an earshot of Jerusalem and Ben Gurion Airport. And if the Iranians succeed in getting weapons from Jordan to West Bank, which they have been up to a certain extent, we're going to be in terrible shape. Which is why it's extremely important to have good relations with with Jordan. Which is why it's very important to stop the visits to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I don't like it that they don't allow Jews in. But in the Middle East, this is the Middle East. This is not Europe. This is not America. This is the Middle East. And as a Jew who grew up in the Middle East, in a Muslim country, I can tell you there are two things you don't touch, two lines you don't cross. Number one, you don't insult anybody's mother. You don't even criticize them. Number two, you respect holy places. If a Muslim says, I don't want a Jew or a Christian or anybody else from coming into my holy place, as disgusting as you may find it, you accept it. And because that place, the Al-Aqsa, is incredibly inflammable. People going on Al-Aqsa causes far more damage to Israel's security and standing in the Middle East, especially with Muslim countries and with our allies, than any benefit it brings. So I think, number one, we should stop all visits. And Shabak have said it over and over again that these visits are wrong and they're damaging. Some religious people also said that that's the old temple and we should not be going there. But Mr. Ben-Gvir goes there and Netanyahu allows him, and I think that's unforgivable. I know to the ears of my Ashkenazi brethren, some of them in the US say, okay, this is a Jewish country. Jews should be able to go anywhere they want. Yes, but we are a Jewish country that shares things with the Islamic world, and Al-Aqsa is one of them. And people going up Al-Aqsa and the whole question of Al-Aqsa being in danger has brought us far more instability and danger than people just going up to that place to pray. There are plenty of places to pray in this region. Number one. Number two, all these extremist settlers going in and attacking Palestinians in the West Bank, I think it's disgusting. This is against Yiddishkeit. I have no problem. God bless any IDF soldier who's fighting Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the West Bank and in Gaza. But at the same time, I'm as much against people going up and picking on innocent Palestinians in the West Bank by torching their cars and everything. And these things, the Al-Aqsa Mosque issue and the West Bank issue, the extremist settlers doing their acts, affect our relationship with Jordan. They affect our relationship with Jordan, especially the question of Al-Aqsa. And so I think we should reconsider some of our policies in order to strengthen our relations with the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. And they are a great partner in fighting extremists. Regarding the anti-US college universities, dear American friends, what happened to your country? I'm at a loss. I just cannot believe what's happening in the US. I'm not an expert of your country. I've visited many times. The achievement of the US Jewish communities is incredible for the United States and for the Jewish world. I just don't know what's happening in your country. You know better than me. The Iranians, I'm sure they're trying to. I don't have any evidence. I'm sure they're trying to whip it up. But I think it's more Qatar. Just a layman's. I think it's more the Qataris, Al Jazeera English. Especially now, it seems that some of these Middle East experts on quinoa salad in Columbia University, on the grass in the tents, these experts get a lot of their news from Al Jazeera English, and that's their prime source of news. That's another thing we have to discuss in the future. I mean, what the Iranians love what's happening in America with the college campuses. I mean, even Khamenei praises it. I mean, oh my God.
There was a
This is
rather amusing case of one of the universities, I think maybe Shiraz University, inviting American 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 students that had been expelled from university for their anti-Israel behavior, that they could come and study in Iran.
yeah, right.
I thought that would be. I can only imagine. I can only imagine they might have to. They might find their obsession with pronouns and
Yeah, go there. Great. Go to
it might
Iran. Yeah,
be,
that's a great place.
yeah,
Uh,
they could find a slightly different attitude. Also to gay rights, which could be interesting.
Look, we cannot deny the fact that TikTok is an anti-Semitic platform, and the Chinese. If you go to TikTok, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is done on research. I think at US PBS did it. If you go to TikTok in China with the Chinese IP, it takes you to astronauts, engineers, programmers, because they want the future Chinese generation to aspire to these things. In the Middle East, in Europe, it takes you to anti-Semitic things after two or three, and in America also, they changed the algorithm. China is our enemy. China suddenly has turned into our enemy, and this is something that we're also going to have to discuss and address after this conflict, which again goes to show how important cooperation is with the United States and the West. Of course, we must safeguard our interests, absolutely, but it's a serious force multiplier to continue with and strengthen our cooperation.
Okay. I think we will finish there. So I want to thank Meir Javedanfar very much for joining us. I want to thank all our audience for joining us as well. We will be back in a couple of weeks. Did you want to say something?
Can I have a closing statement?
Yeah, just let me plug our next thing, and then I'm going to give you the closing statement. All right.
Yeah.
So just in 2 weeks we have an event about a new book that's come out called Safe Haven, which is about the British War Crimes Act, which was supposed to be bringing Nazi war criminals to justice in the UK, and which was a spectacular failure. And it's looking at why it failed and why so many Nazi war criminals have escaped justice. It's a sort of a belated Yom HaShoah related event. But please join us for that. That will be available. You'll get the information from our website and our Facebook page. And if you're on my mailing list, then you'll get the information from me. If you're not on my mailing list, then drop me an email to get on the mailing list, paulg@begincentre.org.il. And Meir, if you want to leave us with some closing remarks.
I just would like to thank all our brethren and friends in the United States for standing with us during this conflict. As a former diaspora Jew, I think Paul and I can appreciate how much you worry and you're concerned about the state of Israel being on the other side of the world. But your support keeps us going. The fact that you're standing with us at our most difficult hour, it means tremendously to us. And I think October 7th has shown us how important the state of Israel is. Thank you very much for your support.
Okay. Thank you.
I have to go now. Sorry. Cheers.
Sure. Bye.
Bye.